Today I'm going to show you how to go from a $40,000 annual tax bill in retirement to paying nothing legally, permanently starting this year. Now that's $200,000 in taxes from age 62 to 67. And it all comes down to 4 tax hacks that rich retirees use and poor ones never learn. So let me show you exactly how this is going to work with a real example. So meet Tom. He's 62 years old, single, and has done everything right. He's saved $2 million for retirement. He has $1.15 million in an IRA, $650,000 in an after-tax brokerage account, and $200,000 in his Roth IRA. Now, he needs about $168,000 a year of spending money to live the retirement that he's dreamed of. Here's the problem. If Tom retires the way most people do, he's going to pull that $168,000 from accounts in the wrong order, pay taxes on that, and then after the IRS takes their cut, he'll actually only have about $128,000 left to spend. So to get his full $168,000 in spending money, he would need to withdraw as much as $208,000 from his IRA and then hand over $40,000 to the IRS each year until he claims Social Security. Now that's $200,000 in taxes from age 62 to 67. But here's what rich retirees know that poor ones don't. There are 4 specific moves, 4 hacks that let you access the same money while paying $0 in federal income taxes. By the end of this video, you're going to see exactly how Tom goes from that $40,000 a year tax bill to paying nothing without changing his lifestyle by a single dollar. So let's dive right in. Here is the first hack. And if you miss this, none of the additional layers will work. Now, poor retirees think that income equals spending money, but it doesn't. When Tom withdraws $168,000 from his IRA, that's $168,000 in taxable income. To actually spend that after taxes, he needs to withdraw $208,000 and then pays $40,000 to the IRS in taxes. But rich retirees know something different. Not all money you access actually counts as income. So here's what I mean. If Tom sells $100,000 of stock that he bought for $60,000, only the $40,000 of gains actually counts as income. The other $60,000 is already taxed money when he first earned it, and it's his money coming back. So Tom can access $168,000 in spending money, but let's say only have $64,000 roughly as taxable income. And he can do this by doing the following. Taking $15,750 from his retirement account, the IRA, which is covered by the standard deduction. He can then take $120,875 from his after-tax brokerage account, which only $48,350 of which is gains. And then he can take $31,375 from his Roth IRA, which is completely invisible as far as income is concerned. And at the end, he ends up with the same spending money, that $168,000, but he actually ends up with 0 tax. And that's what we call the income illusion. Now, this method only works if you know which accounts to pull from and in what order in the different years of your retirement, which is exactly what hack number 2 is going to reveal. So the second hack is all about knowing which bucket of money to pull from and in what order. Poor retirees just pull money from wherever it's convenient or whatever they hear online. Rich retirees are pretty surgical about this. So here's how the tax code actually works for retirees. As a single filer, Tom gets a $15,750 shield against income, which is called the standard deduction. And that means that the first $15,750 of income is taxed at 0%, so tax-free. Here's where things get interesting. Long-term capital gains, right? That's the profit from selling an investment that you've held for more than a year in an after-tax account are also taxed at 0%, up to $48,350 for a single filer. So Tom has 2 zones of tax-free money. The first zone is that $15,750 shielded by the standard deduction. And the second zone is the $48,350 of capital gains that gets taxed at 0%. That's $64,100 of money that the IRS can't touch. Now, here's where poor retirees mess this up. They think their money needs to stay invested, and so they avoid touching their brokerage account. And instead, they pull everything from their IRA because that's where most of their money is, and so it makes sense to pull from there first. But every dollar from your IRA is ordinary income, taxed at, in Tom's case, rates of up to 24%. So if Tom pulls $168,000 from his IRA, that's how he ends up with that $40,000 tax bill. Rich retirees do this differently. They fill their buckets in order. So step one in this case would be to pull exactly $15,750 from the IRA to fill the standard deduction. You end up with a tax rate of 0%. Step two would be to pull from the brokerage account and strategically sell investments to realize exactly $48,350 in capital gains. And again, you end up with a 0% tax rate. And the third step is if Tom needs more money, pull from his Roth IRA. His tax rate on that would still be 0% because Roth withdrawals are tax-free and don't count as income at all. And there's a bonus effect of using the Roth IRA early in retirement. You might be saying, well, I've always been told to save my Roth for last, but actually using the Roth IRA at age 62, 63, and 64 will have a bonus savings effect that I'm going to show you later in this video. So total spending for Tom in this case ends up being $168,000. Total tax ends up $0. And that's $40,000 a year saved just by pulling from the right buckets in the right order. Over 5 years, we're talking about $200,000 that Tom gets to keep instead of handing over to the IRS. But here's the thing, this only works if your brokerage account is set up correctly, which is going to bring us to hack number 3. The third hack here is one that almost no one talks about, and it's one of the most powerful. Here's the problem that Tom faces. Let's say his $650,000 brokerage account, that after-tax account, has a cost basis of 60%. That means that he originally invested 60% of that money and has 40% in gains. So in dollar amounts, we're talking about $390,000 is the original money and $260,000 is what was called unrealized gains, right? That's gains waiting to pay tax on when he eventually sells and takes that money out. If Tom just lets those gains sit, he's building a bigger and bigger tax time bomb over time. Someday, when he needs to access that money, he's going to owe tax on all those gains. And if he's forced to, let's say, realize a big chunk of gains all at once, maybe he needs a large lump sum for healthcare or a new car or a home remodel, he could push himself into higher tax brackets or just end up feeling paralyzed and not spending because he doesn't want to pay the tax in order to extract that money. So this is something that poor retirees let happen, but rich retirees don't do this. They use something called tax gain harvesting to reset their cost basis year by year. So here's how that works. Remember, Tom can realize $48,350 in long-term capital gains at 0% tax. Poor retirees think, great, I'll only sell enough to realize that amount when I need the money. But rich retirees think differently. They say, I'm going to realize those gains every year that I can, whether I need to spend that money or not, because the IRS is giving me the opportunity to extract money in a tax-free manner. So let's say Tom doesn't need the full $168,000 in a specific year. Maybe he only needs $100,000 to live on that specific year. A poor retiree might just pull $100,000 and call it a day. But Tom is going to pull more than he needs from his brokerage account and intentionally get up to the cliff, the limit of that $48,350 0% capital gains tax bracket. And then he's going to reinvest the extra cash that he doesn't spend back into the market. But here's the key. He's going to do it into a different investment. Because here's where people usually stop and they ask, well, wait, if I sell and buy back the same investment, doesn't that violate what's called the wash sale rule? And the answer is yes. And that's why rich retirees know that they shouldn't buy back the same investment. So let's say Tom sells $80,500 worth of an S&P 500 index fund. If he has a 60% cost basis, he realizes exactly $48,350 in gains, which are taxed at 0%. He then needs $50,000 of that as spending money. So he has $30,500 of remaining money that doesn't need to be spent, and he can reinvest that into a different index fund or an individual stock, as long as it's not the same as the original investment he sold. Here's what actually happened for Tom. He pulled out his original $30,500 in principal, realized the gain tax-free, and then put that same principal back into the market. But now his cost basis on that position is reset, so it's higher, meaning that money is now tax-friendlier in the future. He made $48,350 of future gains disappear from a tax perspective. And if Tom does that every single year for the next 10 years, let's say, he's going to reset pretty much his entire brokerage account. That $260,000 of unrealized gains that was sitting in there originally ends up gone and his future tax liability is slashed. The best part is if Tom doesn't need to reinvest that money because he needs it for spending, well, then he pulled it out tax-free anyways. So the strategy works whether you need the money for spending or you're just resetting your basis. And so this basis reset is one of the key tools that separate retirees who are just trying to minimize taxes from retirees who are engineering a zero tax or tax efficient retirement. There's one more layer to this strategy, and this is the secret weapon that rich retirees use to stay completely invisible to the systems that penalize you for making too much money. And this is the fourth tax hack. The fourth hack is all about understanding that not all money is created equal in the eyes of the IRS. More importantly, in the eyes of Medicare, the Affordable Care Act, and your state health insurance marketplaces. So here's what I mean. And this is what I was talking about earlier when I said Tom's going to have a bonus effect. So Tom is 62 years old right now. And in 3 years, he's going to end up on Medicare. While he's leading up to Medicare, he's going to have to pay for insurance on the private health insurance market, which is you get penalized and pay higher premiums the higher your income is. By using these tax hacks, Tom is showing less income and therefore is more likely to qualify for subsidized private health insurance premiums leading up to age 65 before Medicare, and can save potentially tens, maybe in the $50,000 over that time period if he does this type of strategy. Now, beyond that, when Tom hits 65, Medicare is going to look at something called his MAGI, and they're going to look at his prior 2 years of income in order to determine how much he's going to pay in Medicare premiums after 65. If Tom's income was too high for those 2 years prior, he's going to get hit with what are called IRMA surcharges. These are called income-related monthly adjustment amounts. And those surcharges could add up to $6,000 to $8,000 a year in additional Medicare premiums once he is on Medicare. And that income amount is calculated based on his income from the 2 years prior. So it's his income from 63 and 64 that determine what he'll pay at 65 and 66. Now, here's the thing. A Roth IRA withdrawal doesn't count towards that income. It's completely invisible. And so if Tom follows the first 3 tax hacks, then he's pulling money out strategically from his pre-tax IRA, his after-tax brokerage account to stay under the 0% capital gains threshold. But let's say he needs an extra $20K or $30K in a specific year right before Medicare. If he pulls that from a pre-tax account or realizes more capital gains from the after-tax account, he could push his income over what you call the IRMA cliff and trigger potentially thousands of dollars in penalties at Medicare age, but also potentially increase his Affordable Care Act private health insurance premium costs. But if he pulls that money from his Roth account instead, he avoids all those issues. The IRS doesn't see the withdrawal, Medicare doesn't see it, and this is why rich retirees build Roth accounts and use them strategically, right? The Roth isn't just tax-free money, it's actually invisible money. The after-tax brokerage account, when you withdraw that money, those gains, it is tax-free, but it still shows up as income on your tax return. In the Roth IRA account, that money is completely invisible. We call this the release valve that lets you access extra cash without pushing yourself into a higher tax bracket, triggering IRMA, losing Affordable Care Act subsidies, or any of the other hidden penalties that come from making too much income. So for Tom, that $31,375 he pulls from his Roth each year, it's not just tax-free, it's keeping his income at that $64,100 threshold, which keeps him below 400% of the federal poverty limit for his Affordable Care Act subsidies. And it also is the difference between potentially paying standard Medicare premiums at 65 or getting those IRMA surcharges. So this invisible money hack is what lets you live rich without looking rich on paper to the government. But understanding the 4 tax hacks each individually isn't enough, right? We need to look at what happens when they all work together. So I know what you're thinking at this point. You're thinking, it sounds complicated, Eric, and you're probably right. It is a bit complicated, and that's exactly why rich retirees often pay premium fees for advisors or tax planners who can do this for them. But watch what happens when I show you how all 4 of these hacks work together as a system. So Tom needed $168,000 a year to live on. Here's what the strategy actually looks like. Hack number 1, the income illusion, tells Tom that his spending doesn't need to equal his income. So he knows that he can access $168,000 in spending money, but he can do that realizing only $64,000 of taxable income. Hack number 2 tells Tom that he can use this kind of bucketing strategy where he can pull from specific accounts in specific amounts to fill his standard deduction, then pull specific amounts to fill the 0% capital gains bracket, and then use his Roth account to fill the remainder. Hack number 3 teaches Tom how to do what's called the basis reset so that every year when he maybe needs less spending money, he can reset his cost basis and create tax-friendlier future years by using that 0% capital gains, long-term capital gains bracket. And for Tom, over the next decade, he could continue to eliminate pretty much the entirety of his unrealized gains if he wanted to. And then finally, hack number 4, when you put that on top of everything, The invisible money hack allows Tom to use his Roth IRA strategically in earlier years of retirement to save tens of thousands of dollars on private health insurance and to save money in the form of potential Medicare IRMA surcharges once he's 65 and on Medicare. The end result here is that Tom gets to spend the full $168,000 that he wants each of those years before Social Security, and his federal tax bill ends up being $0. His annual savings compared to what poor retirees ends up doing is $40,000 a year, totaling $200,000. And there's a compounding effect, right? By saving $40,000 a year in taxes and keeping that money invested, Tom extends his portfolio life significantly and potentially even increases his spending capacity in future years of retirement. That could be the difference between, a high quality of life and lots of money for premium end-of-life care services in his 80s and 90s versus potentially scrimping or maybe even running out of money at those later stages of life. And so these 4 tax hacks don't just save you money in the present year, they actually change the trajectory of your retirement long term. Now, Tom's numbers are specific to his situation. Your numbers are going to be individual, unique to your situation. And that's where most people get stuck, trying to figure out the exact combination of buckets and withdrawals and amounts for their situation. Rich retirees know not to do this alone, right? They work with sophisticated advisors and tax planners who run the numbers, create projections, and then adjust the strategy year by year. But you don't need to spend tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to get this all right. Sometimes you just need to understand the system. So at the end here, if you'd like to learn the exact 4-step system we use to help clients craft the retirement plan of their dreams, click the link below or scan the QR code that's flashing on the screen now to access a free training video. Thank you as always for your time and attention. See you in the next video.